Hey everybody, welcome back to Hook, the Kayak Anglers Resource. We are going to kind of jump in right where we cut off last week when we were talking about two items that are essential to your kayaking experience when you first start out. We dove pretty deep into life jackets and how that can make your comfortable ride in your kayak make or break. And this week we're going to start right in on kayak paddles. So before we jump into it, if you guys could obviously like and subscribe, but more importantly, drop us a comment. We are aiming this podcast for the people who are listening and would love to know what you want to learn more about. So drop us a comment and let's jump into it.
JT, what paddle are you using currently?
So I have just been using the ones that come with the kayaks. So I have the Van Hunks Pike. So just the standard Van Hunks one, and then I've used the Hobie paddle and the new canoe paddles. So I have not ventured out into actually upgrading to a better, more efficient paddle yet.
Yeah, paddles are you know, it's kind of hard. Like to me, having a motor, having a pedal drive, I'm not super worried about a paddle. But once you're just paddling, it can make a huge difference. When I had my first kayak and I was paddling, I bought a $40 kayak or a paddle from Academy, the Magellan. It's like a steel tubing and then just some plastic paddles on it, and that sucker was heavy. And it wasn't enjoyable, and you really don't know until you know. Um, but it was like that was what I wanted and what I could afford at the time, and I just went with it. So nowadays they're making fiberglass paddles, they're making carbon fiber paddles, they're making all this kind of stuff. So like my first thought is like if your kayak comes like that Van Hunk, start with that paddle. Try that paddle out and see if that works for you. As far as like that Van Hunk's paddle, what do you think of it?
Uh, so I mean, it's kind of nice because you can feather it, so you can change the angle of the blades, which is a nice feature. Because if it's just the standard one, the way you hold it and row might be different than what it is. So feathering is just being able to turn those blades so you can kind of get more of a actual rowing motion. I don't mind it. I think the hard thing is that Van Hunk's Pike is a pontoon style flat bottom kayak, so it is just an absolute beast to paddle. So I have a hard time knowing, is it the paddle, is it the kayak, or
Yeah.
is it just me not having um the best stroke and the most efficient way, because there is a very specific way you paddle. And if you don't know how, you are just doing extra work.
Yeah.
So it's really hard for me to judge that paddle. So in comparison to the new canoe one and the Hobie ones I've used, those are a little nicer. They do feel a little bit lighter. I think the Van Hunks one is aluminum and kind of a click together, so it is heavy. But like you mentioned, I use a pedal drive, so I've only had to use the paddle when I get, I don't know, in a spot where I just can't get out of and need a paddle or shallow.
Yeah.
So
So speaking of, you talking about how you could feather it, most of your lower end ones will have a little clip that pops in and they usually have three different options. So you do have that. If it's one of those things where you're strictly paddling and you're looking at efficiency, you may want one that turns more and locks. The backwater assassin that we sell here, that one's a prime feature that it's got a clamp style, so you can turn whatever angle you want on either side. You can lock it down, and then you've got the ability to adjust it 10 centimeters as well. So you can have the ability to widen that or shorten that depending on what you want. They make those in two different sizes. They make it in a 230 to 240, and they make it in a 250 to 260. Um, where the length comes in, a lot of it depends on your height and a lot of it depends on the width of your kayak. That Van Hunk's Pike that you're in, you probably want a longer, wider paddle. If you've got a paddle that Hobie Outback, you probably don't need one as wide. So if you can find one, like that backwater that's adjustable to a couple different sizes, that may make your day better, especially when we're talking about just paddling. Um, when you go up to those nicer ones like Werner, Bending Branches, a lot of it comes down to weight. That weight changes a lot. You're able to, paddle more, not be so cumbersome, when you are. I know when I was paddling and fishing, it was like, rod in one hand, trying to paddle, with one hand. And, once you get a lighter paddle, that changes a lot. Um, but again, these are the first two things we recommend. If you're going with the Jackson Bite and you're gonna do a lot of river stuff, spend more money on a paddle. You'll enjoy it later. And if you're not really sure, take them out, demo them, talk to your shop, your local shop, and say, hey, I'm looking for a paddle, and is there one that I could just take out and paddle with for a day or two and try it out, and that may be the deciding factor for you.
Yeah, consider your kayak type as well. I kind of
Yeah.
briefly touched on it, but if you have a flat bottom kayak and you're not going to have a pedal drive, that means you are going to be pushing a lot of water and paddling a lot. So that would be where you want to invest in a better paddle. If you're someone, and you talked about it too, if you are getting one with a pedal drive, then you probably won't need your paddle quite as much. So it might not be as big a deal. So
Hopefully
kinda
not.
just yeah, right? Hopefully not. It just depends. I mean, fin drive, like, I have fin drives on the Pike, and it doesn't have reverse. So
Yeah.
there are a lot of times where I get myself into a spot where I do have to backstroke and get myself out because I just get too tight and can't turn. River fishing, I would assume that, a paddle is quite essential because 'cause you're gonna be doing
Yeah.
side strokes, you're gonna be
Yeah.
backstroking. Um, so again, kinda just always calling back to when you set your budget, really consider the how you're going to fish, the type of kayak you're in, and all those things you're going to need, like a nice life jacket and a nice paddle. Like hitting the ground, or hitting the water, I should say, with the right gear is just going to enhance everything, and you're going to have a great time from the start.
Yeah, for sure. Like I mentioned earlier, that backwater assassin paddle, it's been one of our best selling ones. It's a carbon fiber handle. It's lighter. On the actual paddles, on the ends of them, it's serrated, so it's got little teeth like there, and that's kind of nice when you are pushing away from the bank or pushing away from the ramp. It gives you something to bite into. There's been a lot of times where I'll push off on a ramp and it's just being concrete and it just slips. But that has that ability to grip and push away a little easier. Um, they also have a little hook retriever or lure retriever on the top, so it's got a little hook that you can put your line on and reach down there and get your lure unhooked. Um,
For those of us who are always casting in the trees or
dude,
rocks, yeah.
that's where the fish are at. I get there too, man. If I can get it off without doing that, if not, I go get it. Lures aren't
Uh,
cheap these days, so
no, no, they're not. What can you say about durability then between the two? If people are looking at those nicer ones, I mean, is carbon fiber, like, are they more sturdy than one would think?
yeah, I agree. I think they are. I think they're designed to be paddled. They're not just they're not going to break on you as easy, I would say. The other nice part about those higher end ones is typically they've got a better warranty as well. So a lot of times they're going to know kind of, they've done their testing and done that. If you're just banging it on the shore, it probably won't last as long. But I mean, I definitely think if you're taking care of it and using it the way it's supposed to, it would last. And weight's one of those things that makes a 8-hour trip enjoyable versus tomorrow morning you're sore and don't want to go paddling again. So but try them out, figure out what you like. Some of them come with little grips on there. If you like the grips, find some grips, or you can always put some on there. If you don't like the grips, like that different feel, take them off. Whatever's comfortable, whatever's going to make it more enjoyable. But definitely, if you can, try them out. Look at the weight, look at the length, and compare them that feature if you're just solely paddling.
One thing that, when I've looked at them in the past, that I find confusing, and I'm going to put you on the spot, but when people come in and are looking at paddles, how do you size them? You can look at those size charts until your face is blue or your face is red from just, I
Yeah,
don't get this. This is so
yeah,
confusing. So how do you
yeah,
size them to people? I know you mentioned the width of the kayak, but, like, those charts talk about your height. So
yeah.
if you could speak to that a little bit, that might be helpful.
So and this is just kind of like, what other people have told me as well, and I don't know if there's a scientific method to it, but I believe when you're standing on it, you should be able to reach the top of the paddle. So like if you put it on the ground and sat next to it, you should be able to reach the end of that paddle. I guess that there's some comparison there to your arm reach and all that. But for me, first and foremost, it's the width of the kayak. If you get in a new canoe unlimited, you're gonna want a wider, longer paddle, wider kayak, higher sitting seat. If you're in an outback, but maybe you raise the seat or something like that, and you'll still want something a little bit longer. So width in the kayak comes into play, height of the seat off the water, and then your height as well. I mean, you don't want to if you're 5 foot and you're not very tall, then you probably don't want a super really long paddle. It's probably be more work than it is. So just kind of, fill that out. But go back to that backwater assassin, you've got the ability to have some length adjustment too. So maybe that's what go to. Maybe you want to buy a paddle for the next 3 years and you're planning on having 3 different kayaks. Maybe look at something that's going to be able to adjust as far as the length. I know Werner makes one that's adjustable as far as length as well. There's a couple other brands that you can adjust that length. I mean, you are probably going to pay a little bit more, but if it's one of those things that you're investing in that paddle for the next 5 years, then it might be worth it. Yeah. So, life jacket, paddle, it's definitely one of the first two things we recommend when buying a kayak. And, we've talked about, when you go to the kayak shop, what to expect, what you're looking for, what you want. But life jacket and paddle. That would be the first two things we get. And maybe it's one of the selling points on the kayak is a Van Hunks or a Hobie that has a paddle that comes with it too and gets you a starting point.
Really hone in, like make a list when you go into that shop, and just include some of these things in your budget and keep them in mind.
JT, man, it was good having you on here again. I enjoy having you on here. It gives us a different perspective, man.
Yeah, it gives you a perspective of someone who, as of a year ago, didn't really know what they're doing, and a year later, still mostly doesn't know what they're doing. So, anyone out there listening, I am right there with you. All this stuff I wish I would have had when I started. So,
Yeah, man, but that's what it's about. It's not about, the destination so much as the journey. It's fun, learning. And even now, like I've been doing it, for a long time. I'm still learning stuff and, trying to hone in on the craft and whatnot. But, if you're looking to have a good time, get on the water, start in a paddle kayak, get a good paddle, get a good life jacket, and just get on the water and have a good time. Feel free to get on the forum, get on to the comments down below and talk about us, talk about what you want to hear or what you got questions on. We always enjoy answering questions and talking shop with people.